I'd like to introduce you to David Hochman. As mentioned, he's the Executive Director of the New York State Business Incubator Association. He's done a phenomenal job over the last number of years in coalescing this group of incubators and accelerators throughout the state into what is a very active, influential group, and we are thrilled to have him here this morning to bring you up to speed on innovation and acceleration here in New York. So, David?
Thank you, Les. Do you have the clicker for the slides?
Yes, I do.
What do I do?
You press.
There we go.
The bottom button.
The bottom button.
That button.
Okay, keep my finger on it. Okay, good morning, entrepreneurs, you hardy souls of the Hudson Valley. As Les said, I'm the Executive Director of the Business Incubator Association of New York. More generally, I'm a consultant in technology-based economic development. I've been doing that for a number of years. So while I'm sorry we won't have Clayton this morning from the NYSTAR Small Business Technology Investment Fund, I'll actually be able to tell you a little bit about them because NYSTAR is an organization I work with closely, think highly of, and I used to do very similar work in New Jersey. I used to run the New Jersey Science and Technology Commission, which is the analogous organization there. So I'll presume to speak a little bit on behalf of NYSTAR as well. I guess Les asked me to speak about the state of acceleration and innovation in New York State, and I'm happy to tell you that Mr. Ottolini's comments notwithstanding, and they are very sobering, very interesting speech you read from, Les, New York State and the Hudson Valley are still very good places to be innovating. And the Hudson Valley Center for Innovation is, as Les just said, part of a network of incubators that we've built around the state over the last 4 or 5 years. And frankly, if you are an entrepreneur planning a business, operating a business, trying to grow one, an incubator or accelerator, and we'll talk about those two terms, is really the best bet you can find because they're places where you can get mentoring, counseling, support, both from people who've been there and people who are doing it right now. That's what incubation is really about. So I thought I'd start by reminding everybody that this is as distressed as the economy is right now, it's actually a very good time to be innovating. And a lot of people know the stats on small business generally, you know, that small business accounts for by far the vast proportion of operating businesses in the country. By far the majority of Americans are employed in small businesses as opposed to large ones. It turns out that small businesses are critical in all sorts of ways. One of the things that we're learning more recently from the Kaufman Foundation of Kansas City, which has sort of staked out a position as the country's foremost provider of research on entrepreneurship, they focus more specifically on the subset of small businesses that are new businesses and fast-growing businesses and tried to understand a little bit more about how that works. And they put out a series of publications fast and furiously, the most recent of which have just come out in the last 6 months, showing that actually half of the current Fortune 500 actually got started in times of previous recession, economic downturn, or market crisis. So think about that for a second. It means if history is a guide, we're seeing right now the formation of new businesses that will be the large businesses of the future, and the trick is becoming one of those businesses. The other thing that Kaufman has found, and this is less surprising, I think we knew this for a long time, is that small businesses generally account for nearly all the long-term net job growth in our economy. And that sort of depends on what window you look at, how you slide the window over the timeline. But actually, in times of downturn, they can actually, small businesses can be adding more jobs than large businesses are shedding. So it actually, the share can go over 100%. And again, what Kaufman has found is that it's the new entrepreneurial businesses, those founded in the last 4, 5, 6 years, even more than the group of small business as a whole, that account for the largest share of all new jobs. So as I think Les almost quoted Ottolini as saying this, entrepreneurship really is an economic development program. That's really how you ought to see entrepreneurship in your community. So the innovation environment in New York State, as I said, is actually pretty good. We have a highly skilled population because of the heritage of the state in the industrial economy. A lot of entrepreneurial fortunes were made in New York State, and that's actually quite important for us to leverage at this stage. We have a series of very powerful knowledge institutions, by which I mean colleges, universities, research institutes, research hospitals, and I'll come back and give you some data on that in a minute. The Hudson Valley does not have among the largest knowledge institutions, but it has a series of very good medium-sized ones, and it's not far from anchors at either end that actually are very large. I was going to hand off to Clayton on state support through NYSTAR. In his absence, I'll talk to you a little bit about that. NYSTAR is formerly the Foundation for Science and Technology and Innovation. It's actually what's called a public benefit corporation associated with state government. It's funded by the state each year through appropriations. And a lot of what it does is support at our colleges and universities the kind of applied directed research that's of interest to industry. And then it has a series of programs that are intended to help bridge that gap between what companies need and what the knowledge institutions are providing. So New York State's divided into 10 economic regions. There is a regional, RTDC is Regional Technology Development Center for each one of those 10 regions. And Bob, who spoke to you before from the Hudson Valley Technology Development Center, that HVTDC is one of those RTDCs. They run a manufacturing program, and they also provide certain kinds of counseling for startup technology businesses. And in a way, the Hudson Valley Center for Innovation is part of their outreach program for that. NYSTAR also supports a series of what I would call R&D intermediaries, Centers for Advanced Technology at the colleges and universities around the state. TTIP stands for Technology Transfer Incentive Program, money that's available to subsidize applied research by companies that need results that are coming out of the colleges and universities. Right now, a big program at NYSTAR is if your company is applying for anything out of the Federal Stimulus Act, you need to be in touch with NYSTAR because they have the capacity to add a 10% match to your proposal, which makes it much, much more attractive to the federal decision makers. That's called the Innovation Economy Matching Grant Program. And they have had for many years the group that Clayton was going to speak about, the Small Business Technology Investment Fund, which is actually a state-supported venture capital fund that's within NYSTAR. It's been reorganized a number of times, but it started in NYSTAR and it's ended up back in NYSTAR. And it has the capacity to do several deals a year at the seed venture capital stage. Perhaps if you have questions about that, I may be able to help a little bit. We're also seeing very aggressive programs in clean, alternative, and renewable energy from NYSERDA, which is the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority. It's another public benefit corporation. It's funded by a surcharge on your utility bills each month, and well worth it because they are helping position our economy for the new energy era. And I think Les will have more to announce about that later in the season. But there's a lot of good stuff coming through NYSERDA, both state-funded and federally steered. So it's a good place to be innovating. I thought I'd throw up some data, and this is relevant to Adelini's point. This is not international data. This is intranational data. The National Science Foundation each year publishes what they call science and engineering profiles of each state. Here's the profile for New York, and the way to read this is to look at the right-hand column, which is the rank of the state in each of these categories. New York State, very at the bottom, you see that New York State ranks third in gross domestic product, presumably after California and Texas. We're probably somewhere in that range. So any number in the range of 3 is pretty good. Any number lower than 3 is really excellent. We're doing better than our gross state product would suggest. And gee, we really do pretty well, and the absolute numbers are pretty significant. Look at the number of holders of doctoral degrees broken down by the major aspects of science and engineering. Look at the size of federal expenditure in the state both generally and then specifically on R&D, industry R&D, academic R&D in the life sciences, engineering, and physical sciences, awards from the SBIR program. Who here knows about the SBIR program? Does anybody know what that is? About half of you, maybe. Small Business Innovation Research Program. It's a federal program that sets aside funding from any federal agency that does R&D must spend 2.5% of that on small business R&D. So it's a remarkable program that meets the federal government's need for research through small business and provides a form of quasi-venture capital from the federal government for small technology businesses. You can look at these data on the NSF website, compare with other states. This is a pretty good profile. This is not a bad place to be thinking about an innovation business. Okay, I said we'd come back and talk about incubator and accelerator. These are both very flexible terms. A lot of people use them in different ways. The classic definition that comes out of the nonprofit community is defined by the National Business Incubation Association, which we belong to, is about nurturing entrepreneurial companies, helping them survive and grow, just like a chicken incubator or baby incubator, helping them survive and grow during the startup period. And the specific focus is on providing business support services and resources tailored to young firms. Notice that the formal definition doesn't refer to a physical facility, although classically most incubators have been tied to a physical facility. But what distinguishes a business incubator from a landlord simply throwing up a group of offices which can be rented to small businesses is this provision of business service. So what does accelerator mean in the sense that Les has used it? It also can mean a number of different things. I've heard it at least in these senses. Some people mean it as a facility where small incubator companies that might have 2 or 3 employees, when they're ready to graduate and go to 10 or 12 or 15 employees, they might go to a larger facility that has less hands-on business assistance. Some people call that an accelerator. That's not the sense in which Les uses it. Some people use it just the way some use incubator to refer to a venture capital type incubator where the whole point of it is to make money for an investor, and you don't get into the acceleration program unless you're in the investment portfolio of the venture capitalist. That's also really not the sense in which I think Les uses it. A lot of people use it the way I think you do use it, which is to refer to an incubator without walls, one that's not tied to a physical facility, but gives particular attention to the business development, mentoring, and support services over and above the space issues. And I think that's the way you should think about Les's program. So the Hudson Valley Center for Innovation, let me put it in the context of the statewide network. This is what I would call a business accelerator, operating on a very virtual model. It is closely associated with the Hudson Valley Technology Development Center that Bob spoke from. It's a founding member of our Incubator Association, and Les has been on our board until we get to the ends and kick him out. He's going to be on our board. And there are only 2 of our member associations actually in the Mid-Hudson Valley, the Hudson Valley Center for Innovation and the recently opened Orange County Business Accelerator. That's all we have in this region right now, so you've got a special asset here. The membership of our association, we've got more than 30 members around the state. They operate or are planning, some of them are still in the planning, more than 40 different facilities or virtual programs. We're a statewide group. We have members all the way from Buffalo to Eastern Long Island. The types of groups that are represented in our membership, predominantly university-owned, operated, or affiliated incubators. Probably a good 60% of our members, maybe more than that when you count by number of facilities, are university affiliated. They split very nicely, very evenly between SUNY campuses and private independent institutions, so there's a good divide that way. The balance are mainly independent, nonprofit organizations like this one, like the Hudson Valley Technology Development Center. A number of the similar organizations around the state either operate or sponsor very similar kind of programs. We have a few state-chartered entities. The NYSERDA that I mentioned before has a green energy park that it's opening up in Saratoga. They're a member of ours, and so is the Harriman campus, which is in Albany, redeveloping. It's a subsidiary of Empire State Development corporation that is redeveloping the old Harriman office complex right at the edge of Albany, across the street from SUNY Albany. And then we actually have a couple of for-profit incubator companies among our members, some of the kind of venture capital model of incubation, and one farther upstate, the Mancuso Group, which is actually a real estate company, which has always been in it as a for-profit landlord, but somehow they have managed to keep an intense focus on helping the small companies that flow through their facilities. They are actually recognized as the developer of the world's first business incubator in Batavia, which is southwest of Rochester. They took an old manufacturing plant and reinvented it as a small business center. So they're our members as well. Here's what it looks like on the Google map. You'll see, actually it's, on our website. It's no surprise, as I said before, anything in New York State is going to follow the old industrial corridors, the canal corridor, the thruway corridor, if you like, stretching from Buffalo to Albany, then down the Hudson Valley to the city and out onto Long Island. These are where the big cities are. These are where the knowledge institutions are. These are where the great industrial fortunes were made in the 19th and 20th centuries. This is where the highly trained workforce resides. By and large, this is where you're going to find business incubators will thrive. So just to review, why should you work with an entity like the Hudson Valley Center for Innovation? And I would say because each incubator in our network, and this one in particular, becomes a focal point for entrepreneurial energy. If you're doing an incubator right, it becomes the gathering spot for everybody who's important in the picture. Investors at the angel, seed stage, informal venture capital, mentors, counselors, business advisors, for-profit professional service companies, financial institutions, management talent, very, very important. Sometimes the person who has the idea is not the right person to be the founding CEO, or if they are the founding CEO, they need someone else. They need a marketing VP, they need a sales VP, they need a manufacturing VP. An incubator done right becomes a place where people like that cluster and can be spun on to an entrepreneurial team. In many cases, and I think Les can provide this too through his affiliations with the community colleges in the region, an incubator provides access to college facilities and student labor for those who need either or both of those. So, and within our association, we all know each other and work with each other. Anything that Les can't get you here, he can get you somewhere else in the state, and that's actually an asset that's very, very valuable. So here's where you can you learn more about us. We have a website. That's the current calendar sticking off the edge there. Basically, it's news from all over our network across the state. You can subscribe to the RSS feed, an email newsletter. There's a member directory there with full links, the calendar you see on the right, web forums. We do special events from time to time. Let's see, yeah, we're on Twitter. Yes, we're on Facebook. The LinkedIn I tend to keep reserved for people who are actually either running or in one of our member incubators, but obviously Twitter is a completely open way to track what we do, and the Facebook page is open as well. So any way you want to track what we're doing, either by subscribing to our newsletter, following the feed, following one of the social networks, there are plenty of ways to keep in touch with what's going on around the state. So that's it. That's me. I'd be happy to answer any questions either about incubators or, to the extent I can, about NISTAR and what Clayton would have talked about if he'd been able to make it here.
David, what kind of trends do you see in incubation around the state? Where do you see that heading?
Well, I actually do see a trend towards some virtualization. I think that particularly the incubators that are based on college campuses, it no longer makes sense to think about them just as the physical building, although most of them do have a physical building. Many of them have more than one physical building. But the big colleges and universities around the state all have campus venture centers, entrepreneurial centers that give them the ability to reach out well beyond the walls of that physical facility. So I actually think the college-based programs are going to merge their without walls activities with their with walls activities increasingly, and we'll find more organizations that look more like what you do.
What do you think are some of the deficiencies of some of the incubators in terms of commercialization, mentoring, going to be needed within the incubation community in order for this to keep expanding?
Right. Well, I mean, there are challenges in running any of these things. Unless you're of the venture capital model, we were talking about this before outside in the conference room, unless you're an incubator in the venture capital model where the whole point is to make money, and it's all run for that purpose, most incubators don't make money. They lose money. The rents collected from tenants of a physical facility can pay for the operations and maintenance of the facility, but they can't pay for the network of business assistants and mentors. So if you're going to provide those things, you have to identify some source of ongoing subsidy to pay for them. And this is a terrific challenge that all incubators in the U.S. have, and I think in New York State we have it more acutely just because it took us longer to get organized here. The other thing that Clayton, I think, would have talked about if he'd been here is we need more seed stage funding for the companies that come through incubators. Some companies are appropriate for kind of micro-lending type activity, but they tend not to be the high growth prospects. They tend to be the lifestyle type of companies that are perfectly good companies. We like them as taxpayers, as employers, as everything else. High growth potential companies typically come with all sorts of business and technical risk that's not appropriate for lending. They're equity deals. And yet, not all of them, most of them, are not ready for formal venture capital right off the bat. You know about the venture capital world, you know the numbers they're looking for and the multiples they're looking for and the short time frame they work in. It's unrealistic to expect you're going to have an incubator full of companies that are ready for formal venture capital. There needs to be a farm team. There needs to be earlier stage funding that moves people along their business milestones and lets the investment community assess whether they are reasonable risks or not. The SBTIF at NYSTAR provides some of that funding, but as I mentioned, they have only the capacity to do a very limited number of deals each year. Governor Patterson has put in his budget proposal for this year, we'll see what happens with it, it's a very difficult year, put in his proposal a $25 million pool for seed stage equity funding, which they would in some way compete out from Albany. They would decide based on a competition who could run it based on how much leveraging financing the operator could bring to the pool. That would be a big change. That would be a huge, $25 million is not much for a size the state of New York, but it's $25 million more than we have available in fresh money this year. That would be really, really important, and to the extent any of you are involved in political processes, we hope you'll support the governor's budget on that question.
We hear so much on the federal level about innovation and new initiatives to help the small business. What have you seen, if anything, filter down?
Well, the federal government basically backed out of economic development in 1980, and it's taken a long time for it to back in. There's not a lot that the federal government has done historically to assist local economic development other than infrastructure support for building the bricks and mortar facilities. So if you want to open an incubator, you want to have a physical facility, it's usually a good shot you might be able to get matching support from the U.S. Economic Development Administration to do that. But it's always been about public works spending. It's about putting up the bricks, not about sharing the cost of the programs. In the President's budget, actually in the current year budget and in the budget year budget, the one that the Congress is about to explore, there is money for what the Obama administration is calling regional clusters of innovation. I don't think they've fully worked out yet what that means, but they know that it's got to be about more than bricks and mortar. And I think it's going to involve coordination of the Economic Development Administration, the Small Business Administration, and other actors. Jobs get created in one community or another, and I've always believed that you have to No, I mean, no. We didn't have any incubator association until 4 or 5 years ago, so we're the only one. The National Association is moving toward a formal chapter structure. It doesn't have one right now. We will probably be recognized as the New York State chapter for that.
Okay, and then NYSTAR has its own website?
Oh, sure. let's see if I remember, www.nystar.state.ny.us or state.ny.us. Yes. And you should definitely check that out. Other questions?
David, you're funded by grants or?
I wish. I wish. We're funded by membership dues and sponsorships, and that's the reason I'm a part-time director and have to sustain myself doing other consulting, because it's not enough to support a full-time director by any means. Yeah, right, right. Right, well, Connecticut Innovations used to do that. They used to have a seed fund, but my guess is it hasn't been refreshed in a long time either, like the SBTIF. I mean, I agree with you, and I also try not to make extravagant claims about incubation. It's not the be-all and end-all of an economic development strategy. You have to keep doing industrial recruitment. You have to keep doing retention work, but you also have to have incubation as part of the stool. And I think that, again, the reason I have that slide up there about what an incubator does for a community, if it's working right, it raises the level of excitement and involvement and visibility for entrepreneurship, and it sends a signal that your community welcomes entrepreneurs, that it's something you value and want. It's actually pretty cheap marketing viewed that way. But in terms of direct job creation, I try really not to make extravagant claims.
Any other questions? David, great job.
Thank you, Les.